Dr. Jazz. Dr. Jazz.
You know, I've been listening to your music since the Quartet came out, like the first one, I think, with Manu.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, I've been a fan of Manu for a long time, and you know, then I searched and I played with him a little, and
oh, great.
Then I saw some records that he did, and I was like, okay, what's this? Chris Jennings. So can I check it out? And so that's what I found out about you, and since then I kind of followed what you've been doing. So
wow, nice.
that's cool. Yeah, and you've been pretty active the last time, right? In the recent period, I saw you have so many new records out, and
yeah, it's a period where a bunch of records as a sideman have been coming out.
yeah,
So it's been nice. It's like last year and a half.
yeah, quite active.
The usual, it takes you record it and then it comes out like a year and a half later.
Exactly. Yeah. No, but I want to start first of all with your work as a leader, you know, as a bass player.
Sure.
And you know, there are many amazing bass players as band leaders. You know, I don't know, even from the current, I don't know, Mike Formanek, Mark Elias, Mark Dresser, all these amazing guys, and
Yeah.
even before, you know, Mingus and of course everyone else, and Dave Holland. And what changes for you as being a band leader, as a bass player, opposite to being a sideman? I'll start with that.
Yeah, but I guess the first two things that come to mind would be the fact that, of course, as a band leader and in jazz, I take advantage of the situation of being a composer.
Yeah.
So it's first of all, it's a sort of a vein or a way to get my music out.
Yeah.
And then, of course, there's the second part of being a band leader and the responsibility that goes around that, which unfortunately is in it being a lot of administration, as everyone knows.
Yeah.
There's a lot of hours go up until doing the gig.
Yeah.
Until the gig actually happens.
Yeah.
But for me, when that happens and when you do the gig and when you get to play your own music with people you love to play with, I mean, it's all validated in a few seconds.
Yeah. Definitely.
But it's definitely a different type of vibe as opposed to, you know, just getting a call from the agent or the musician and saying, yes, I'm free and showing up. So, but in a way, I think I'm lucky because I came from Canada and I started out as a sideman, like most people. And I started at a really early age. I did a lot of sideman stuff.
Oh.
And so I had a lot of experiences sort of in lots of different veins and types of music and
Already in Canada, or
situations in Canada? Yeah, it was my job when I was 15. I started doing gigs with the professional musicians who were older, which is kind of like the old school way of learning by ear and just doing that,
like Jacques style.
Yeah, and so I think it was nice that by the time when I went to university in Toronto, I started to compose. I already had enough experience as a sideman to become a band leader. I'd already experienced things, so I kind of knew what to go about or how to go about it a little bit. I mean, it's still a learning curve, and I'm still learning from it. Yeah. But having that experience as a sideman, I think, is really important, and I'm glad to have that and then become a leader, as opposed to just being a leader, not being a sideman.
Yeah, definitely.
In jazz, and especially in North America, this is often the case. So yeah, I always kind of made it a important part of my music and my musical life to always have my own group or groups and my own music, and that's kind of always going. Maybe moments it's slower and moments it's going better, but it's always happening. I think that's really important.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Do you like both? I mean, put it on a scale, or
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of ironic because the last while here with all this COVID stuff, also I moved into a house. Life changed a little bit, and I had a few years where for the first time I wasn't really actively pursuing my own project. Okay. And I started to really, really miss it. And so now the last 6 months I've kind of got back into it. And that was the first time I think ever since maybe I started composing when I was about 17, 18, that I didn't have my own project. And I realized that that's kind of important. Yeah. It's not really the idea that I have to perform for people, but it's to have to get the stuff out inside me of like, also
exactly, I know what you mean. Yeah.
Make a soup with all the stuff I've learned from being a sideman and see what comes out, you know?
Yeah. No, it makes total sense. For me, it's the same now in this period. You know, I know with these projects, some of them that I'm doing now, I will not probably play gigs, but just to do it, you know, it's important. But it's like your main vehicle, like for composition, is like the Drum'n Koto now, kind of, or no?
Not really. You know, when I compose, I think if you were gonna say stereotypically, there's kind of maybe two ways of composing.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that. Yeah,
people who maybe compose and a song has to like grow and it changes shape and molds around and stuff, and then maybe after 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 months, it ends up being a song. And this is kind of the way I like to work. And there's other people who are really great at, like, I write a song a day, and maybe every 17th one or every 40th one is a hit, you know? And so I've tried that also, but I think I work better in the other sense. So what I do is I kind of maybe have a melody or something harmonic, and then I start to write the song. And usually what I end up doing is it's the people who I do sessions with and play with who end up finishing the song and helping me finish the song. And so it has a certain time where it grows with just me, and then I'll try it out with some friends or try it in one of my groups. And each person that plays it, I can kind of, by how they react, by what they do that's inspiring, by what they do as a mistake, shows me that, but this part's maybe I should change. This part is clear. Should I write the chart out this way or this way? And I kind of like to do this for a little while. And then all of a sudden there's kind of comes a moment when you're like, okay, I think it's done now. We can put it in the envelope and send it to myself in mail, you know?
Yeah. It's like a sculpture kind of being.
Yeah.
Like,
So,
but do you compose for people, like for specific people, or like?
I would say most of the time, up until maybe just a few years, I always compose just as a composition.
Yeah.
So it's not really an arrangement, but it's more like a lead sheet, and then I adapt it for different people, and I let those people. Yeah. My goal is to have something that's kind of like a structure that if I give it to Mieko, who's playing the Japanese koto, she's going to interpret it in her way, and it's going to come out that way. So if I write it well and it's composed well, it should be easy for her voice to come out in it.
Yeah, that's
And then from time to time for different projects, I've actually done specific more arranging. I did a project with a Swedish trombone player named Karen Hammer and Ingrid Jensen.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I saw it, yeah.
And my longtime friend Petter Goraguer, who's a great drummer and pianist. Yeah. We did a project which on purpose there was no chords. And I did that actually as a goal because I'd never really written for stuff where there's no piano or guitar a lot or no harmonic content. Yeah. So that was like actually a challenge to see how I can write and arrange it. But even those songs, after I've adapted them to use for other music. But that was an important example where I arranged. With the Drum'n Koto, it's not really arranged because she's such a great improviser, and she just says like, just give it to me and I'll figure something out. And you know what I mean? And I think in general, my groups, even with the Quartet disc you heard, like that band, we rehearsed to learn the tune, but like I never had to tell them anything. In most of my groups, I don't say anything. We do the music and that's that. That album, it was just supposed to be a demo. We'd rehearsed and then we went into the studio for, I think it was about 4 hours, and we just recorded it. And then I was like, well, it sounds really nice. We should just put it out. Yeah. And so it actually became an album, which was just supposed to be a demo. Yeah. And I like that kind of a situation.
Yeah. Our studio can be quite tense otherwise. Yeah. Like, okay, we have to record now. Yeah. You know, so.
And also coincidences. Like the quartet actually was formed because I had two trios. One trio with Patrick Goraguer on drums and Pierre Perchaud, the acoustic guitar player. Yeah, and the other trio was doing some sessions with Patrick and Manu, Codjia on guitar. And then the main jazz club in Paris actually called me kind of out of the blue and said, have a cancellation. Can you put a group together? And I was like, Bob, which group do I do? I was like, well, maybe I should just put them together. So it's a bit like being a mother or thing on like afterwards, like, okay, well, is it okay with the other guitar player? How did you feel? And they were like, yeah, it's great.
Did Pierre and Manu play before together or?
No.
No, right? Yeah.
And the nice thing is the same thing. It's like I didn't arrange anything. The tune was there and the content was there. And that's what I love is you just give it. They made the arrangements on the spot. And And the stuff that happens is more spontaneous,
beautiful.
or after a couple gigs, things kind of get established. But I really like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's a nice band because you know Manu has this more modern style. This like because of the guitar, of course, nature of the instrument, you know. But the blend is so nice. It's quite cool. I love that quartet.
I really consider there's like two different instruments. I mean, they're both guitars.
Yeah.
Their role in the band is quite different. So
yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah.
But speaking of composition, you said you come up with a melody, right? And do you compose like on piano or in how do you compose? I mean, on our bass or?
It depends. Some stuff on the bass, some stuff on piano. I play a Turkish saz. It's like a hybrid.
Oh, really? Yeah, I know it. Yeah. Oh, wow.
A luthier in Besançon. His name is Hervé Prudent.
Okay.
And he made my travel upright electric bass. And there was this saz, which is like, it looks like a saz, sounds like a saz, but it's stringed like a electric bass.
Oh, wow.
Missing the low E and adding a string up top.
Yeah. Wow.
And it's custom made left-handed, and a guy didn't buy it, and it was in his store. So every time I go to his place to get my electric upright fixed from the airlines breaking it, I would play this saz, and eventually I was like, I have to take this. So we made a deal that I could take it and pay him in installments, and this is a big composition tool for me.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
My next album, which is going to come out with my new trio, that's going to be with I'd say more than half the music that I've got together already is composed on the saz and then arranged for me playing bass, or actually some of it I'm going to probably play on the saz also.
Oh, really? Wow. And what's the new band? I mean, like
the new band is actually I wanted to go back to the piano trio because I've played so much in piano trio, and I have lots of projects which are actually, I'm known as a sideman in a piano.
Sideman, yeah.
And I love this situation, so I wanted to create my own piano trio. But as you know, kind of like with the Drum'n Koto having different instruments and Iranian santur, I wanted to make it a bit of a twist. So it has santur, or it has a saz. So it's piano, drums, and bass, and saz as well.
And
so
who are the guys in the band? I mean,
so in the band, it's actually Petr Goraguer on piano. He's an incredible piano player.
Really?
You see, he plays with guys from Richard Bona to Julia Greco.
I didn't know that. Wow.
All kinds of stuff. Yeah. He used to play with Chris Jennings
really
in America together, and so he's on piano. And Eric Schaefer is the drummer.
Oh yeah, okay, from Joachim Kühn, kind of.
German drummer from the trio. And Eric and I met on Joachim Kühn's new band about 5-6 years ago.
Yeah.
And it feels really good. So I guess I'll surround myself with drummers. So
that's cool, actually.
Yeah. And then so on the demo we've done for the moment, I overdubbed the saz on a bunch of stuff.
Wow, beautiful.
And we'll see if maybe I get a guest for the live to kind of replace that, or
amazing.
But it's interesting that the compositions are coming from the saz, and it really gives it a different color. I think it's like kind of in between country from Canada and this sort of oriental, like Middle Eastern kind of vibe to it, which is kind of a resume of my past.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you, where does this come from? Because, you know, I listened to this one from Tehran to Tokyo, which kind of the title already suggests, right? It's, you know, you Iranian and because of Koto, the instrument, Tokyo, I guess. But it's like you have so many odd meters in there. And I wanted to ask you, where does this influence come from also when you compose, you know?
Yeah, well, most of it comes from just being a sideman. Because I ended up, especially since I got to Europe, falling into a bunch of bands where...
Yeah, I would love to ask you about these, so, definitely.
Of course, we can talk about it later, but things with like Dhafer Youssef and Nguyen, the music is like this.
Yeah.
And I started to experiment that with composing. Dave Lieben, who I've had really a pleasure to cross a bunch of times as a student and also playing in bands with him, he said a great thing that he actually composes something to work on it, and I think it is really great. And I try to do this, like there's a song on the Quartet album called Riaz, and it's like it's a 7. It's nothing really mind-blowing, but what I did is I reversed the 4 and the 3. So instead of it being 4-3, which is the very typical, I make it 3-4. And the reason being was because I couldn't play the groove backwards. So if I wrote the tune like this, it gives me something to work on, to get better and to practice. And Dave talked about this in a master class we were in once, and I really like that concept. So every time I write a tune, I try to incorporate it, and usually just by default, I mean, it's whatever I'm working on at the moment, whatever music I'm trying to put together in another band, or whatever I'm listening to and discovered. So a lot of these influence came from that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But how do you like? You know, you mentioned Dhafer Youssef's music, right? Or well, I mean, I checked out some compositions. I was like 20 years ago, obsessed with Eastern influence, you know, and I transcribed. There was no sheet music, like I think all albums by Rabi Abu Khalil, you know, the oud player.
Sure.
And you know, I wrote down forms, probably wrong, but at least to get the idea what the rhythms are. And I tried the same stuff with Dhafer's, and you know, there's like, I don't know, a strange forms like 31/16, I think, beat or something, like, you know, something bizarre happening.
Yeah.
And also with your music, sometimes it's, you know, these odd meters. How do you practice, or did you practice being comfortable in these forms?
It sounds kind of simple to say it, but I think it's like if you take someone from Eastern Europe, they're used to playing some of these meters because they grew up with, and they grew up with it, and they got used to it, which means they just had a certain number of hours playing it.
Yeah. Okay.
I play a lot of the odd meter stuff. I mean, some of it I'm less comfortable. Some of it I feel comfortable with now. But I think it's really that, finding ways of practicing it in a productive way, where you're getting more comfortable with it. There's different ways of hearing it.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
So
yeah.
If I was going to really generalize some of the ways I practice that music, and also some of the ways the band would think of that music, you can think of it as if it's say something in 17/16. So how could you think of it differently? But first of all, you can think of it as just having a quarter note pulse. Yeah, and then there's either going to be some missing or some added 16th notes to make the 17. So in this case, there'll be 1 16th note extra. Does that make sense?
Yeah, sure.
So that would be one way to have a constant pulse. So that would, if you analyze it, you could think of it as like a big band where the drummer, he's playing kicks like ba ba over a pulse that's constant. And then of course the other way of thinking of it is the groupings. So actually, instead of it being 4 4 4 or these groups of 16th notes, then it's like a 7 and a 5 and a 3. And all that's depending on either the groove, the clave of the groove, or usually the melody is actually dictating that.
Yeah.
And so that would be the first way I would try to hear it, in those two different ways.
And then kind of mess around within that, then, like kind of instruct. Yeah.
There's a great mentor who I've learned a lot from, and his name is Efren Toro. And he's like the guru for Vinny Caliuda and Alex Acuna, even Terry.
Oh, wow. Really?
And I heard him do a masterclass in 2000 in Toronto. And at that time, I think most of it just flew over my head. I was really a jazz bass player playing standards and not being so exotic as I've gotten into since I've been in Europe.
Yeah.
And then later on in life, I refound stuff, and I also found him on the internet. And I contacted him, and I was really thrilled because his stuff kind of hit me now. And I was really interested. And when I contacted him, he actually knew me because of playing with Dhafer.
Oh,
so
really?
He had been checking it out and following it. And he's interested in lots of different stuff.
Beautiful.
And so I kind of got a lesson from him, and we've been in touch since then. And one of the great things that he says kind of all music is obviously boiled down to 2s and 3s. And so it's so simple, but it's really the essence is like mixing the 2s and 3s and this combination. And he says with 2 against 3 and with 3 against 4, you have all the subdivisions and polyrhythms you need. Yeah. You can do 9, you can do 11, 13, everything is there. He says anything above this, then it's intellectual and it's not natural. And he's always going for sort of a more natural, organic, this grooves because it's natural. Yeah. And so I've learned a lot from that kind of concept. He also says something really interesting, saying that every music that grooves has 2 and 3 like working together. And he says music that doesn't groove is only 2 or it's only 3. And after I heard that, I went back to my record collection and listened to a bunch of stuff. And I was like, yeah, he's right. I mean, this sounds two-dimensional because it's only 2 or it's only 3. And then if all of a sudden, if you hear the 2s and 3s together, it's grooving. And it's not stylistic either. I mean, like you could listen to a Beatles song and it grooves. I mean, it's beyond style.
Yeah.
It's just rhythm.
Yeah.
So playing along with this idea of mixing the 2s and 3s and hearing stuff in this way, for me was a great way to try to become freer in the music. When I have my students and we're practicing stuff, I often get them to try feel things sort of on the beat and off the beat. A bit like a drummer with a backbeat. There's like beats which fall towards the ground, like with a bass drum, and then there's like the snare drum, which is like kind of like the beats thrown in the air.
Yeah.
So hearing a groove or a clave with beats going towards the ground, like grounded, and then beats in the air, and messing with that. So you can either follow that and do that, or you can do something else and hear that. I don't know if that makes sense. So it could be something in 7, and of course, if you play through the 7, you're going to be upside down or backwards for a certain amount. And the idea is to be comfortable with feeling that and letting that happen, and then actually keep track of where you are and be either with upside down, or you know what I mean. And so it's this way of being free, not trying to just get licks going or to count all the time. Actually, how can I feel a groove and just count it?
But this is like, you know, for me, like, you know, we're all learning still. I mean, I love writing in odd meters. You know, I think all of my music is in odd meters, and you know, it's. And like you said, like when you write a song, it's kind of a tool to learn also something. I use that as well, but you know, I'm still not, let's say, playing in 5 or in 7. It kind of, I can do whatever in those. It's kind of easy, you know, you can turn them around, whatever. But when you have like a 16, like 31-16 structure, that's for me when it becomes like really problematic to feel comfortable. You know, you can count it, but just to feel it, that's why I wanted to ask you that.
One thing I like about, like, for example, Dhafer's music is it's complicated, but I think it has a part of it doesn't sound like when we do, you can almost dance to it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's complicated, but even if it's odd meters, it should groove, and it should be grooving because of that. I don't like this idea of like creating an odd meter just for it to be hard. I mean, there's no point to it. So I think on that level, he of course is a bit more farther down the road with it and taking it to more extremes. But it's the same idea. It's like it's in that odd meter because it grooves and it dances like that. And so when you play it, you have to find a way to do that too.
Yeah.
So if you find the essence of what's making that groove and what's making that dance, but if you play something, it should make sense. If you're just going to count it, but it's not going to work.
Yeah. No, makes sense. But you know, it's like Stink or you know, Salisbury Hill by Peter Gabriel. Yeah. Like it's in 7, or like some Stink songs are in 7. And you just don't know that they're in 7, or audience, like non-musicians probably don't know that it's in 5 or 7, but it's...
For me, that's like, when it's like that, it's a success.
Yeah.
Often, like when I was in Canada, my father, he really supports my music, but he's not a musician. And sometimes he's the best ears, because I'll play a song, and at the end of the night, he said, I really like this song. And he liked a song that was like in 13.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, but that's a good thing, because if it doesn't sound just hard and complicated to him, then there's music in that.
Yeah.
And it's for the right reason.
Yeah.
I have other songs that I've written, like everybody, who you think it's going to be great, and you're like, it didn't really make it.
Yeah. No,
so I think that's really important, and especially, it has to be musical. So whether it's harmonic or rhythm that we're playing with or doing, it has to, if it's musical, it's justified. It's kind of like that thing they say with like Miles Davis. He could play notes that were so wrong, but what he played before and what he played after justifies it. So it's right.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah. No, it's just, you know, for me being sometimes the soloist more, it's easier to get lost. Even if you have a complex structure, you somehow find your way in, you know. But being a bass player, I think, you know, you miss one beat and it's playing, I don't know, with all these amazing drummers. Yeah, you know, it's not, I guess, easy to get lost sometimes, because
I feel so grateful to be able to play with the drummers that I have, and I've always kind of, even my best friends have always been drummers, you know, like it's always been super important to me. And a kind of funny thing in the band with Dhafer, often, because we didn't really rehearse ever. So when he had a new tune, he'd actually just play them by ear to us on sound check.
Seriously, you didn't get lead sheets, or?
No, no. There was a couple, but they were no forms. It was just like the melody with the bass line. But the rest was, a lot of it was by ear. And so all the new tunes he would just give us, he would just turn around and play it on the sound check. And we'd have to kind of like get it. And so, of course, like Mark and Tigran, they eat it up. And I have to find a way to basically figure it out. But there was no time to count, which was kind of the beautiful part of
good.
It. Makes it more like a world music situation.
You listen then, yeah.
So I would play it, and of course I'd try to record it on an amp really quick. And then, of course, I go do my homework that night in the hotel. But what you do is we kind of like play it like that, and at that point, there's no time to count, so you just have to feel it. And the faster you can feel it, the faster it's gonna be happening. And when you're playing with great players like there, I mean, they make it so much easier because you can they'll follow them around, they'll help you, and it's really fun to make music.
Yeah.
What we would do is on the sound check, he'd play a tune like that for maybe 2 or 3 sound checks, and each sound check you'd get a little more set, and then there'd be a day where we'd like go and actually try play it as a tune.
Oh, wow.
I like that process.
Yeah.
I play with a special group called El Gusto, which is an Algerian traditional shabby orchestra, which is the pop music from Algeria. And that really changed my life. I've been doing it for 15 years now. And I was the only foreigner and the only young guy in the band. Basically, it's billed as kind of like the Buena Vista Social Club of Algeria.
Wow.
We did concerts in the States at like Lincoln Center, Kennedy Center, big dates in Europe as well. And this group, it's just traditional music, and it's all by ear. And a lot of it, you have to just hear it, and also a lot of it you can't really know where it begins and stuff. Ironic thing about it, which kind of goes back to what you mentioned a little bit ago. It was there was a tune we were playing, and I was trying to figure out where's the beginning, like where's one, and I would turn over to the percussionist. There are 46 musicians on stage, like 2 true grand pianos, 6 oud players, 6 banjo. Wow. It was like huge. And they're playing, for them, it's like playing jazz standards. Yeah. They actually finish a tune, we're playing, and all of a sudden, wait a second, we changed tunes. When did we change tunes? And I would just have to play everything by ear. And there was one time I was trying to figure out where's the beginning. And I would ask him, I said, is 1 here? Does it start here? And the guy would be like, yeah, sure, okay. And I was like, that's not very convincing. So then I would ask another guy. I said, where does it start, here or here? And he would look at me, he's like, what you're playing is great. Don't change a thing. It's perfect. And no one would answer. And then finally, I actually got my answer was them not answering, because they don't know actually where it begins, and it's not important.
It's just natural.
A Western musician trying to figure that out. And for me, I needed to, in my head, do that when actually, no, it's not necessary. I mean, if you just play the music, eventually you'll start to hear it as if you're growing up. Yeah. I'm never going to pretend that I came from Algeria or know that music like them, but you can kind of absorb it like a sponge, and there's a certain moment when it starts to stick to you, you know?
Yeah, no, it makes sense. Yeah,
that was
it's
really,
like at the Balkans the same, right?
Yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah, that's the best experience to do it. I mean, for them it's so natural. They're just like, you know, the guys on Tapan from Bulgaria and Macedonia. It's like, you know, playing some 11 beat is just like changing all the bass accents and everything. It's just like, wow. Okay, not even knowing. I mean, they know what they do, but in a sense they don't also. So it's just like. But
they feel it.
They feel it. Yeah, that's incredible. Yeah, I love that.
I think every kind of music has sort of musicians from the sort of traditional standpoint that those musicians, they just play. And that's what makes it so great, and that's why it's so good. Yeah. Because there's this natural aspect of what they're doing.
Yeah. But I love this, that this we kind of successfully, at least I hope, transferred this to jazz as well, you know, the odd meters, because it adds so much. One thing I wanted to ask you, I will not forget, in this Drum'n Koto, there's one song called Teila.
Yeah.
What's the form there, or the beat?
It's based off the Gnawa, which is the traditional sort of trance music from Algeria, Algerian Morocco.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And so and the shabby, which I talked about a minute ago, is the popular folk music, and the Gnawa is from the tribes, which are nomads.
Okay.
And this is a music Nguyen Le got me into. And Nguyen Le, if you don't know this, he did an incredible album called Maghreb and Friends.
Yeah, I have like all of his records, man.
He kind of revolutionized from his point of view this, and he got me into this, and I subbed in the band basically. And on upright. Normally it's these crazy electric bass players, and so he said, yeah, we're going to do this project. It was actually Kareem Ziad, who his gig. Kareem is kind of the expert of sort of organic ganawa on the drums, you know.
Yeah.
And so he's like, you have 3 weeks to learn how to play ganawa. And for those who don't know it, ganawa is like basically the clave, which is also the bass line. It's based off the 12/8 triplet feel, and it's never on beat 1 of the triplet.
Okay, that makes sense why I couldn't.
It's kind of hard to explain it, but so basically you have this like 1, 2, dagata, 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 tak-tum, tak-tum.
Yeah, okay.
And then when you speed it up, it has just sort of this kind of lilt to it. So I wanted to write a tune, and that comes back to the things like I was learning the ganawa stuff. So, okay, I'm going to make a composition with the ganawa stuff and put that into place. Yeah, so the bass line and the melody, everything is based off this clave. So if you know this clave and you check it out, everything will actually line up. Okay. And then there's this pulse underneath, which is just sort of 4/4. Yeah. And what happens is when it goes to the bridge, it's like the 12/8. If we have 1 bar, we have 12 triplets, 12 eighth notes. So normally those are grouped in 3. So there'll be 4 groups of 3. And when it goes to the bridge, I group them as 3 groups of 4. Okay. So it becomes like a 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a. Yeah. Okay. And then so at the end it goes 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 1 down, and it goes back to the triplet.
That's tricky. Cool.
So what happens is you get this feeling, which I also like to explain from what I've learned from the ganawa stuff. It's like I feel like there's different wheels of time. So you're in a 12/8. You can hear it as four groups of triplets. Yeah. You can hear it as 3 groups of 4 16th notes. You can hear it as quarter notes. Yeah. That makes sense? Yeah. Or you can hear it, and then you can feel it in these different ways. So it's almost like the gears on a bike. They're all turning. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Faster, slower. So when it goes to the bridge, it feels slower because we've taken one of the wheels where it's going around bigger. The beats are bigger. Yeah. And then it goes back again to the smaller one. Yeah. And then for this completely revolutionized how I think of a waltz. Yeah. And up until then, I really felt a waltz like a Western musician from Canada, like dun dun. Yeah. The typical stuff, rhythms we hear in jazz. But now, since I played the ganawa, it's like a waltz. It feels it's almost like a 4/4. It's all the same now. I don't have to think of it as a 3 or in a waltz. Yeah. And it also opened me up to the idea that actually there's a lot of rhythms and a lot of ways of feeling rhythm in 3, which is really interesting, which we don't practice a lot compared to what we practice stereotypically in jazz in 4. 4, yeah. That makes sense? And so now being able to hear what I've learned to play in 4 and be able to hear the equivalent and learn and practice it in 3 has really, and it's really helping me rhythmically open things up. Amazing. So that was a big revolution for me, the ganawa and the shabi and this music. Also the fact that it's not on the beat 1 makes it so that it's kind of in the air. There's like this sort of like openness about it, but at the same time it's set. Yeah, I don't know.
No, it makes sense. That screwed me up when listening to that. You know, I was like, okay, I feel the beat, it's there, but where's the one?
If I remember quickly, like the bass line, I usually play 1 bar, almost like the quarter notes, like a dakata, 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 and then the second bar, I do more the clave. So you can kind of go back, and if you keep the pulse of when I do like 2 or 3 quarter notes,
I'll try to follow it.
Feel the clave underneath that.
Okay. I'll try with this now in mind to listen to it.
I don't have it now, but I make like a little chart where you can see the idea is like actually the clave, it'll fit in different places, obviously, if you're thinking in 3, 4, or 6 over the 12/8. And so the clave will feel like it's all in the air if you're on the 4s, but then if you think in 3 or in 6, the clave, it's going to fall on the downbeat.
Yeah, of course.
And this is where, like, for example, if you listen to Kareem Ziad doing it, his backbeat actually can fall on the downbeat because of how you're interpreting it. Yeah. It's so hard to talk about this without just being able to play the music example, but
no, but I know what you mean exactly now. With
I think it's really beautiful, and also coming back, like it's organic, it's natural. You know what I mean? It's not just complicated to be complicated.
Yeah. No, it makes sense for them. It's like really natural, of course, because it's their tradition. Yeah. But yeah, quite cool. I love what you did. I'll check this song now again. Like they really with this, like okay. But Chris, I just wanted to ask you first of all. You know, we mentioned Canada. Just want to go a little bit back and what like I saw that you thought you were like a student of amazing players like Palle Danielson and John Patitucci or. Ray Brown. I saw like where did these connections all happen? I mean, as a student, like.
Yeah.
And how was it to learn with Palle, let's say? I mean, he was incredible.
But just to go back, when I started out, I'm from Alberta. And when I started there, I had my first teacher was a guy named Dave Watts. And he, after quickly passed me along to another teacher named John Hyde, who was my first, these were my first upright bass teachers. And then alongside of that, I met my sort of mentor, who's my mentor still today, named Dale James, a great electric bass player. And incredible, and a huge percentage of what I know about music and how I think about music I owe to him. And I think I would have ended up in, you know, like some hotel playing cheesy music or something if I hadn't come across him, put me in the right direction, you know. Okay. And so I started with that, and then when I moved to Toronto, I went to university and I got to study with people like Jim Vivian and Don Thompson. For Canadians, these are
Don Thompson. Yeah, I know. Yeah, he's incredible.
And so alongside of that, quickly what I realized, especially in Canada, is, I mean, there's not thousands of jazz concerts like there is in Europe. And so when a big artist comes through, if you're hungry and you're learning and you ask them for a lesson. So like studying with Ray Brown, what happened is he came to town and I went to hear him, and of course, I mean, I asked him for a lesson. Yeah. Like, how could I not miss this opportunity to get a lesson with Ray Brown, who I've listened to and I've played along with for so many hours? I mean, everyone has their sort of like their route that they go in the music, and I went through a huge Ray Brown phase, and so the idea I could get a lesson from him was perfect. So actually, I talked to him afterwards, and he said, "Yeah, meet me at the club the next day for a lesson." And he was teaching a couple other students, and the lesson actually went really bad. I think he was in a bad mood before me, and then when I had the lesson. It's quite a nice story. When I had the lesson, he said, "Okay, now why don't you play me a scale," which is kind of like very typical. Like, okay, you can see a lot in the student just from playing a 2-octave scale or whatever. Okay, now play me a song, any song you want. And that's where it kind of like started off bad, because I had never prepared anything, and I didn't know then, like, okay, I'm a bass player, but I should still be able to play a song alone. Melody, and so. Yeah. I refused to choose which song I would play, even though of course I knew standards. It's been my job for years, but I was like, and then so he started suggesting stuff, and I ended up saying yes to Bye Bye Blackbird. I started to play it, and it was like, some of it was okay, some of it was, I was faking, like I didn't know the tune enough. I'd never actually worked that out to be able to play the bass line or the melody or on the bass in that way. Mm-hmm. And so it was a real wake up call, and the lesson just kind of went down from there. And at the end, he told me, he says, "Okay, when I come back to town, you call me right away, and we're going to set up another lesson. And if you're bad as you are now, I'm going to probably charge you double. And if I can tell them my work's paid off, it'll be maybe, you know, $50, maybe nothing." And I like shake his hand and left.
Wow, like, that's quite cool.
It was a big wake up call. So first thing I did is I started to be able to prepare to play standards and songs on my own, which kind of like was a precursor to my solo project, which I have now for over 20 years.
Yeah.
And then, of course, I think it was like 2 years later, who comes to town? Ray Brown. So I'm like, uh-oh, what do I do? So if I don't get a lesson, that means I've kind of like, I've given up and I like forget it. And if I do get a lesson, I better be better. Otherwise, it's going to be expensive. And so I called him for a lesson. And of course, this time it was in his hotel room. And the lesson got off to a really good start. And I was able to present myself, and I felt like he could hear me in the way that I really played and everything. And it went great. And at the end, I was like, okay, what do I do? Do I say, hey, you know, a few years ago you said, I was like, no, that'd be a bit weird to say that. So I didn't say anything. And in the end, I think he charged me like $40, $30 Canadian. It was absolutely nothing. And I shook his hand and said thank you and left. So the end of the story was good, but it was a really good lesson. And so
that's the best,
that just kind of continued. So when I went to Europe, for me, it was absolutely incredible because all these bass players are floating around everywhere. And so when people would come to town, I would just ask them for a lesson. And I think in France it's a bit harder for the French community because there's so guys are much less courageous to go up on stage and ask the guy. But I was like, I don't care. I mean, I want a lesson from Mark Johnson. I want a lesson from Palais. And Palais Danielson is really one of my mentors, even to today. And so he came here playing, and I went to talk to him and ask for a lesson, and he couldn't. He said, keep in touch. And then I started to go to Sweden quite a lot to play. And when I went to Sweden, I went to his house, and I had a lesson with him. And for me, it was just life-changing. And I saw him off and on for about 7 years, 7 years.
Oh.
And basically study with him. And we'll go to his place, and he would like, one of my favorite albums is Personal Mountains, Keith Jarrett album.
Sure.
And I would like had all these questions to ask him about with that band. And he's like, well, let's go put it on. So I was like in his living room, and we're listening to Personal Mountains, and he's showing me what they're thinking and how they're playing. So for me, it was just dreamy.
Wow.
And then John Patitucci was thanks to my mentor in Calgary, Dale James, because they knew each other and they were really good friends. And he helped put me in contact. That was also, I had to not insist, but I mean, for me, these guys are heroes. So I don't feel like I can, with Facebook and stuff today, people I think are much more in your face when they want something or when they want to meet you. Yeah. And back then it's like, but I have to, my place isn't up there or near them. So it took a long time, and I would always ask him if he's around for a lesson when he came with Wayne Shorter and stuff. And he's like, oh, I'd love to, but we don't have time and everything. And then just one day he called me out of the blue. I was in a restaurant with a friend. It was winter, and the phone rings. It was like, it's John Patitucci calling me. And my heroes. Like, excuse me. And I went outside, and he basically was super, super nice. He was in London. He said, look, I know you've been trying to get a lesson for a long time now. I'm playing in Grenoble in like 1 day or 2 days. And say, I don't have anything to do there, and we have this day. Can you come and we'll just get the lesson done then? And I said, yeah. And then we just talked on the phone for like a half hour outside, freezing myself off. And my friend sitting in the club, I was like, Jean Patitucci called me. And since then, we actually became quite good friends.
Really?
And I tried to stay in touch with him. And I had a bunch of lessons with him in Europe. And I went to his place in New York. And beautiful. I think these experiences are really, really great because each of those people I've been able to spend time with, they're such masters that they usually, I mean, you know this, but they like go right to this point and they talk about just that, and that will change me for life, and I'll never forget that. Yeah. And so with Patitucci, for example, we went back to sort of bebop and really sort of pedagogy. I'm losing my English with being friends. Like he's a great pedagogue in that way. So he helped me with a lot of getting that stuff together and harmony and stuff. And with Palais, it was more sort of like in the stars. Like he's not really a teacher in university, so you just had to spend time with him and talk. And so each of these musicians I've spent time with Mark Johnson, I wanted to be able to have a control where there was no, on the bass you have thumb position and normal position. And for example, when I had the lesson with Ray Brown, he said when you go into thumb position, you just put your foot up in the back and push the bass up. And when he does that, it sounds amazing and it works. But when I wanted to play more like Mark Johnson, I found like he has no border there. So that was one of the things I asked him about and worked on with him, and certain elements and just the 1 or 2 phrases that they tell you. I mean, it's like gold. Sure. And definitely. I think this is extra. We always need our teacher and the person we're seeing on a regular basis, but you also need these moments. And they're really precious, and they kind of go hand in hand with sort of like someone who's guiding you on a more continuous basis.
I know exactly what you. I had like a couple of lessons with John Scofield. And you know, I still have them on tapes. You know, like. And one of the things, you know, we just played, and he said like, "Well, Samo, think like a saxophone player, breathe." You know. And I still remember this after 20 years, and I still keep this on. You know, transmitting this to my students, like, you know, make phrases like I talk now. You know, breaks and breathe and. That completely changed my, you know, because us as guitarists or bass players, you could play basically uninterrupted 16 notes for 2 minutes if you want to, because you don't have to breathe. But things like that, like you said, you know, this is like, I love that stuff. That's beautiful. And
it's important.
But you mentioned, Chris, just your solo bass playing. I listened to Left Turn Signal, and it's quite different in a sense than typical solo bass playing. I mean,
Okay.
like in a way you use also these effects and stuff, and you know, I love solo bass playing. You know, I listened to, I don't know, Mike Formanek a lot. You know, that one solo record, Am I Bothering You, which is amazing for me. And like, how do you approach solo bass playing, and where did the idea actually come from when you, what you mentioned now with Ray Brown, or?
I think I didn't have it in mind at the moment, but it did come from that because it was the first time I was under serious pressure to show who I am as a musician, being completely alone on stage. So for me, the solo bass project, its main goal is that it's a way of getting out, or way of putting together everything that I'm doing at the moment. So the project as a sideman, the music that I'm listening to, the people I've heard, it's basically putting all that together and cooking something with that. And the project, my solo project, has been over 20 years now. And when I first recorded it and did it in Banff, Canada, a great art center in the Rocky Mountains, that was the first time that I had to put that together. And I did that because I was in a residency for the year, and everyone there was classical musicians. I was the only jazz musician. So I had no choice if I wanted to perform. Either I play with a classical musician where it's the typical, like the classical musician doesn't improvise, he could play along, or I do this. So I started to put that together. A little bit before that in Toronto, I started to mess around with it. And I think it even comes from the first time you're in a band or you're in school and they teach you that you can do an introduction to a song. So I think if we do this in a logical way, which I ended up doing, is okay, you do a solo in a tune, you're accompanied. Then you do a solo in a tune where everyone stops. Okay, and then you do an intro to a tune. Okay, and then eventually you do one song alone without the band. For example, in my own projects, I love having a moment where I have the bass alone. I think this is really important that the audience, the vibe of the concert, for a moment we hear the bass sort of in all its splendor, the lows, how they are, the highs, without having to compete with the other instruments. And I think that justified, like, so in my bands, I always want Mieko in the Drum'n Koto to do something alone. In every band I have, I want everyone to sort of this featuring.
Featured,
and, and to hear the instrument and to hear them, hear their musical voice and everything. I think it's very important. So eventually you have a solo tune in the group, and then all of a sudden you can do an opening. So I play 20 minutes solo for something with the rest of a band or another project. And then I do a whole set, and now I can actually do 2 sets of music or more. I have more than enough music. And so, but this took time. I mean, it's a slow evolution. And it's kind of, for me, a logical one. I wouldn't have been ready to do a solo concert for an hour. I mean, you would be bored to death or leave, you know? And so things kind of just went in this logical way. And along with that is my musical path kind of nurtured that. So what you, from the CDs you can find online of my 2 solo projects at that time in Banff, I was just starting to experiment with some small effects, but almost nothing. And it was really just the instrument. And so Left Turn Signal, when I wrote this, I remember writing it in the main combo room at University of Toronto. And I can remember trying to figure it out. I wanted to make it so that I could play everything, the melody and the bass line at the same time, and work it out like a guitarist would be playing a flamenco with a melody on top. And so that's the whole basis of the tune. And then if the tune's strong enough, then I should be able to also transpose it into other groups. So the first group I did it was with the Drum'n Koto, and I gave it to Mieko, and she found a way to play it on Koto, which was beautiful. And so from this, things went on, and then I started to really get into effects. And then, of course, I'd have these periods where the solo stuff would go up, and then I'd be doing busy with it, or I'd do a radio concert, and there's something will come up, which would mean that I can put the solo repertoire together again.
Beautiful.
And each time I did that, I would add new songs or new elements. So once I discovered Gnawa, okay, but the solo concert, all of a sudden there was a Gnawa thing in there. You know what I mean?
Yeah, sure.
And when I was doing a lot of effects, it was Nguyen who asked me in one of his bands to try experiment with more effects. So I started to really go down into that. Then, of course, the solo project, I had a solo concert. So then I used that occasion to have a couple songs. So when I do my repertoire for solo, there's like stuff that's playing standards. alone, playing with effects, playing with loops.
Yeah, different things. Yeah,
different categories, and now I can just kind of go around and pick and choose. And the latest was with Joachim Kühn, the free jazz piano player. I'd never really played free jazz in that way before meeting him. I'd always played free jazz in a club where everyone's drunk and, and not listening, and you barely get paid, and there's no risk in that end. And then all of a sudden, Joachim called me and asked me.
How did this happen? I mean, Love Peace is so beautiful, and that Beauty and Truth, both records are beautiful.
This group really changed me. It was like he came. He has the same agent as Nguyen, so I think he heard of me a bit through there. And then one day, he just his agent called and said, Joachim wants you to be in his new band. He hasn't really done a piano trio since the sort of famous band with Daniel Humer and Jenny Clark. Yeah. So he's like, he wants to start this again after 20 years. I was like, with me? And so it was a bit, I was a bit overwhelmed. And then I was okay, yeah, great. And then I had learned what he was doing and stuff more. I knew his music a little bit, but hadn't really jumped into it. And then just kind of plunged into it. And then I figured, in my experiences as a sideman, I started to learn that when someone hires us, they're not really hiring us to do what the last person did. I mean,
yeah, they hire you because
he keeps hiring me. He wants me to do what I do.
Yeah.
I had a sort of situation when I was in this group where it was with Lee Konitz, and I was like, man, because I play jazz. Jazz is really important. I always do standards. This is an important part of my musical career, but I wouldn't really consider myself a straight ahead jazz bass player. I was like, Lee Konitz playing with me is like, what? I mean, he's played with Charlie Hayden, all these greats. Like, what am I going to do here? And so at the beginning, it was really frustrating, and I hated my playing on the first gigs. And I was like, this isn't working. And then I realized I was trying to be those bass players. I was trying to play what I thought he would want me to play.
Yeah, that's funny. Yeah.
And I realized that, no, this is just wrong. Because first of all, I can't. And that's not what he wants. So then as soon as I just started to play the way I play, of course, in that vein of music and playing in that group, in that context, then it was like, okay, this is normal. I'm me again.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And so that was a big lesson for me. So with Joachim, I already had that experience. So I knew that when he's hiring me, I just have to bring my music and my musical voice to his project. And that would be the best that I can do. Because if I try to be the other bass players, I can't, that just doesn't make sense. It's a lost cause.
Yeah, no, it's such a beautiful trio, man. Like,
so really great to play together. Yeah. We did all this free music, and he really opened this door up for me.
Yeah.
And coming back to the solo project, now my solo project has tunes which are free tunes in them.
Yeah.
And I think everything is really intertwined, because now even groups like with Nguyen, where it's very sometimes arranged, fixed, hard music, for some reason I have I feel freer with it. Definitely. And I know it's because of playing with Joachim, because he can make me see a more open, free aspect of that music within it.
Yeah, that's like we're learning all the time. Yeah, that's
a really good example. With the solo project is such a beautiful situation, because it's kind of like live or die. Because if when you're playing and it's happening, it's great. But if it starts to not be happening, there's no one to take over.
Exactly. That's scary.
So the free aspect of it is really interesting, because Joachim kind of showed me that, well, if it's going somewhere musically and this is musically great, I shouldn't abandon that to play the riff or to play something that's just written or part of the music. That's not logical, because you're listening to it because it's musical. So he opened things up, and I think he really helped me take my solo playing to the next sort of level. Because in places where I would feel kind of handcuffed by the groove I've started, or I have to stay within that, I can now abandon that to continue the music, which is the music which is driving the tune.
Yeah.
So it's not like it's not like a pass to just do whatever I want, but it pushes it in that vein, which keeps the music more musical instead of just technical or just playing the tune or playing what's supposed to be written.
Yeah, makes sense. I mean, that's the idea anyway, right? I guess.
But it took me a long time to figure that out, and it's a nice coincidence that in this period of my life and career, that all of a sudden for 6 years now, I've been in this sort of free jazz band. The first time I was petrified, because we were playing in Jazz Baltica, this huge
festival.
Theater, like a couple thousand people, and I'm supposed to just play free, and I'd never really played.
That was the first gig?
Yeah, but I don't know if it's the very first one, but it's in the beginning, and it was I was not comfortable, and it went great, and now it's cool, but it was like, wow, okay, it really opened things up for me.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
But you mentioned Nguyen also. I wanted, I organized a workshop of him in Maribor like 8 years ago and met him, and I've listened to his music, since the early records with Reno Garcia. Those are amazing. Like Bakida is for me, like,
Sure, of course.
And how did you guys meet? How did you become part of also like this Streams? The last record is so beautiful, and I mean, how did this connection happen with Nguyen?
It's a long story, but it's a great story.
Please.
When I was 16, I heard Nguyen do a concert in Calgary, Alberta, and they were playing in trio with Danny Gottlieb, Pat Metheny's drummer, and Dieter Ilg, a great German bass player. Yeah, and I freaked out at this concert. I had recorded to mini disc, and I started learning as much as I could off the mini disc that I had. I started buying his CDs.
Oh wow!
And then when I went to Toronto, I was one of the only people in the University of Toronto that was crazy about this guy named Nguyen Le, and I was getting everyone to listen to it and stuff, and everyone knew that I was crazy about him. He was one of my heroes. Wow. And then I moved to Paris, and I didn't know he lived in Paris, so I saw he played lots, and I would go see him play. But for me, it was too much. I couldn't go up and talk to him. I just wanted to hear the concert and take that home with me. And then little by little, I started to see him more. And then just actually one day out of the blue, he came to one of my concerts that I was doing in a little cafe with him and his wife. And they came and listened. And so he came up and presented himself, and we talked. And then nothing happened. Then maybe like a few months later, I was at a birthday party of a friend's in the garden, and Nguyen Le called. And he said, or no, sorry, before this, I was teaching. I taught at the Conservatoire Shell in the suburbs of France. It was my residence card, and everything was all attached to that.
Oh, okay.
Teaching gig for seven years.
Oh, wow.
I was teaching, and on the Saturday, the day where I have 9.5 hours of lessons with half-hour break to eat lunch, he calls and he asks if I can come to his house in the evening for dinner and to do a session together. And I said, and I didn't know what to do. Like, my hero called. He invited me to his house. I have to teach. If I cancel now and I lose my teaching job, I have to go back to Canada. So I said no. I said, I'm really sorry, but I can't just cancel like in an hour, 2 hours with the students.
Sure.
And he was super nice. He said, okay, no problem. I'm on tour quite a bit, but we'll find a time to meet. And then nothing happened for like 4 or 5 months. And I thought I'd missed like the best opportunity of my life. And then one day I was at this friend's house in the garden, and it was his birthday party, and Nguyen called out of the blue. I'd almost forgotten, I thought it's gone by. And he says, look, we don't manage to meet. I'm not around much, but I have a new project, and the first concerts are in Hong Kong. Normally it's keyboard bass, but we'd like to have a real bass player playing in the band, and would you like to do it? Like, yeah. And so that was
cool.
Basically it started that way. And then over the years, he basically had me sub in almost every one of his projects, the Hendrix project, the Gnawa project, on upright bass, which was a really wonderful challenge for me, because with these great bass players like
Lily Martin and all these guys,
Michel Alibo and all these guys who are already heroes of mine, I mean, it's like, what am I going to do? I'm not going to pick up my electric bass to play in the band after them being there.
Yeah.
So, but Nguyen wanted me to play upright bass. So I was like, okay, but what do? I can't play that. It's just, you can't, it doesn't, first of all, it doesn't translate the electric bass playing that way onto upright bass. And it's physically not possible, a lot of it. Yeah. So it was I had to approach it differently. And for me, it opened up a whole new chapter of music and stuff. And for Nguyen, I think if I guessed why he wanted it, is that the double bass, since I can't play that fast and that in that vein of music, it got the music a little less fusiony and more space to it by default, because you had no choice. So it's okay, how do I keep the intensity of his music but with the space and stuff? So it was a great challenge. And also, how do I play loud? Because Nguyen has a huge sound on stage. I've never played with a guitar player with that sound on stage other than him. I love it. But it's like, okay, but then I had to think of a system with the bass to have a pickup so there wouldn't be feedback, and Like it was some of the loudest playing I've ever done on stage with him, like the Hendrix project and stuff. So all that was a natural challenge to put that into place sound-wise, like my sound on the bass, and also musically, how do I do that?
Yeah.
And so he basically, I consider him kind of like my musical dad. You know, it's thanks to him that a lot of stuff happened, and he showed me the way in a lot of different respects. And I put a lot of stuff together, playing in those bands. And now when I'm hired, a lot of the time, if I said stereotype, I'm being hired either to play bass in a music where there's electric bass, and now I'm going to do an upright bass, or I'm going to do it in a band where there's no bass at all, like the Algerian project, and I have to create the bass part. And that's kind of been my niche, which I love. I've learned so much from that kind of situation.
Yeah.
And then just to continue it on, I mean, Nguyen became a great friend and mentor, and also I met Dhafer Youssef at Nguyen's house at dinner.
Really? Yeah, I wanted to ask you, how did that story happen, Dhafer? Yeah.
Just met like this, and then he kind of looked into things, and then he ended up asking me to be in this band with Tigran and Mark. That's a lot of, and then there's much more stories with Nguyen. He kind of like opened the big door to a chapter of my musical life.
Yeah.
So I'm really grateful for that.
Yeah, no, it's you sound amazing on that last record. It's so beautiful to hear the double bass again in his music in a way. You know, his early stuff had Renaud, he's not a typical double bass player. I mean, but you know, it's nice to hear like the new record. But
with Nguyen, one more thing is that to finish the sort of like the timeline of everything was, there was basically 17 years after I moved to Canada.
To France, yeah.
Or no, 17 years after I heard him play. So from when I was 16, I found myself on stage doing a tour with him and Danny Gottlieb and with Rita Marcatulli, a great Italian pianist.
I know her. Yeah.
And Nguyen made a quartet with us. And so that was kind of another huge sort of pinnacle moment in my musical life, because 17 years later, I found myself on stage with my hero and Pat Metheny's drummer.
Yeah, beautiful,
which I heard when I was 16, and at this point I had no idea I would move to Europe. I had no idea I'd be a musician. And
how was like that for you? I mean, like,
but it helped, because my life in Paris, I've been here since 2002, but I don't really consider myself part of the Parisian jazz scene. I play more concerts out of France than in France, and I played just a handful in Paris each year. So I always ask myself, I mean, it's like any musician's ups and downs. And there'd be really slow periods like, what am I doing in Paris? Because am I really meant to be here? And after that tour and those concerts, I was like, okay, even if I'm not making my living in Paris and not really part of that scene, I mean, I know the musicians, we're friends, we play from time to time, but this is okay, because if this happened with Nguyen and this event could happen, it kind of justified, like, okay, just if you want to stay in Paris, stay here. This is good. This is a good thing.
Yeah. Amazing.
So,
Beautiful. Man.
And then the Streams album, which came out, Nguyen's last album. John Hadfield, who's an incredible New York drummer who's become a really, really good friend and a great vibraphone player, Ilya Amar.
Yeah, I love the vibes, man, on that record. It's
such a nice situation with this group. And this was also important because this was the first album that I did with Nguyen where I'm actually the bass player on the album. Because up until then, for over 10 years, I would sort of be in the band. I always afterwards. So the album had been done, the group had been established, and then I became in the group.
Yeah.
So this was nice. It was important for me to actually have an album where I'm the bass player in the band.
How was the process like of Streams? Like, did you guys rehearse a lot? Because the tunes are quite, like you said, arranged and quite complex again. And
the tunes, to be really honest, they're really hard. I think some of it we do a good job of making it sound more simple than it is. But this music took a lot of time to
digest in a way,
get ripe. And so but we kind of played off and on for periods. So for a certain period, it kind of go up and up and up. I forget how long we actually recorded it, but it's a good thing. Other projects, even with Nguyen, were much quicker, but this one was kind of very dense. And in a good way, it was a great challenge. And now we're fortunate to do several tours. And we did tours like old school with a van because of the vibraphone. Where we did like 15 dates in Europe and 3,000 kilometers in a few weeks. And that really helped. Of course, that helps the music amazingly.
Yeah.
And so now the music has taken shape. And I think also this is an important album for Nguyen because it was the first time in a long time that he put out an album where it's only his music.
Yeah,
So
it's quite more
really
jazzy
great.
in a sense.
He does a lot of arranging, so he'll take Vietnamese music and arrange it, and even write tunes in that vein. Or he'll take pop tunes and arrange them and stuff, and it really becomes his own voice. But this was like, it's been a long time since an album where he really composed everything himself.
Yeah.
And of course, he's really generous. We each have a tune on the album. We always play in the concerts. Everyone plays a tune of their own and stuff, which is really great to be able to hear him playing on our tunes and stuff. So the context of the group, I think, it's really nice.
It's a group, actually, right?
Yeah.
That's beautiful, man. Yeah, it's such cool stories. Beautiful, man. I just wanted to ask you, like, just one last thing, Chris, so that don't take too much of your time, and I have to cook also.
No?
So.
Good.
But it's like we mentioned Dhafer and this super quartet that you had with Tigran and Mark Juliana.
Yeah.
And how did that group happen? Like, you know, how did that group come together? I mean,
I think everyone, when they start a group, I mean, the thing I like about this group is that I think if you looked at us on paper or heard each of us separately, you'd never really imagine that we would all make a group together. And often this is what makes it interesting, is because it's so unexpected in a way, and what everyone brings to the music themselves makes it really something quite unique. Dhafer, basically, when the group started, he kind of went to each of us. So he came to Paris to me, and New York to Mark, and kind of showed us each the music individually.
Really?
And
oh, wow.
I recorded about half by ear and half sort of sketches. I wouldn't really say they're charts or anything. And then we just, each person kind of put the music together, and then we rehearsed all together. We actually didn't have a rehearsal. We just had a sound check. We did a concert at the Institut du Monde Arabe in Paris, nice concert hall. And that was, we met there, and we did the sound check, and we did the concert, and then we went in the studio for 3 days and recorded his album. And then the group actually toured for, 5-6 years. Really solid.
This was actually like a touring quartet in this lineup.
Yeah.
Wow.
We did a lot of, I'd say for a jazz group, we toured a lot. And it's with him I basically went to all corners of the globe. Yeah. So it was really, really, really fun. Yeah. And the group, the only thing I regret is that we never recorded another album. And it was a shame to record. I can't really listen to the original album because it was after one concert only, and the music has changed and gone so far since then. It's too bad that that's not more documented. I mean, there's a couple nice concerts on video and stuff, but there's nothing really towards where they end. So I think it's really nice, and the fact that each person brings something different to the group, it's important, and that's what makes it kind of unique.
No, it is. Yeah, I loved it. I saw Dhafer I think 2 years ago in Ljubljana, but it was with Ferenc and
But I also subbed
Joe Sanders on bass.
So I've been doing the latest projects, the stuff with Aaron Parks and stuff. I would sub when the American guys couldn't do it, which is really fun.
Yeah.
I mean, Dhafer, we're really good friends. We're still in touch. I talked to him just a few days ago, and I know he's a close friend. So
Oh, beautiful. Man. So cool. Cool, man. Chris, thanks so much for sharing all these stories.
Thank you. Huh?
Beautiful. Yeah.
Dr. Jazz.